Before we start today's show, I have some exciting news to share. The 10th anniversary edition of the novel I wrote, The Sound of Violet, is now available wherever you buy books. It's a story about a man who thinks he found his soulmate, but his autism keeps him from realizing she's being trafficked. I created this new version to deepen the characters and the emotional experience, and it's been getting terrific reviews. Kirkus Reviews calls it a heartwarming love story with standout characters that readers won't forget. The Book Life Prize says, the prose has the sweet, forward-moving cadence of a great romantic comedy, and readers will swoon. The Sound of Violet 10th Anniversary Edition was named one of the best 100 books of the year by Shelf Unbound magazine, and the novel ranked on Amazon's bestseller list for romantic adaptations. It's official, I'm a best-selling author. You can check it out and find out more at thesoundofviolet.com. Now on to the show. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for this interview sponsored by Navigating Hollywood. My name is Alan Wolf and I'm a filmmaker, an author, and a game creator. Today I'm talking with Harry Yoon, the editor of Minari. We're going to be talking about his experience with this exceptional film. Hopefully you've seen it by now, his love for editing, and we'll get to know Harry a little bit as well. Harry is also one of the editors of the upcoming Marvel film, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Sounds exciting, can't wait. But first of all, huge congratulations for Minari and the Oscar nominations.
Thank you so much, Alan. Yeah, it's like a dream come true. We're so excited just to get, I think, that kind of acknowledgement from colleagues and peers. It's what you dream about, I think, when you're starting off in this industry. And so, yeah, it's been a dream come true. Thank you.
Incredible. I mean, a year ago, did you ever think that this is where your life would be today?
Absolutely not. I mean, we was just dealing with the beginnings of like shutdown and the pandemic and everything, and just grappling with that. And those issues loom so large. And so it's been kind of surreal to have the film come out in this environment. But just the fact that audiences are seeing it, in a variety of ways, I mean, that's just making us all so grateful.
An amazing film, so touching. And, I'm curious when you first realized that you were working on a story that you thought, this might really resonate with people.
It's so interesting because the film felt so personal from the first time that I read the script. I could so identify with the experiences of the Yi family because, I grew up in the 80s and my parents are immigrants. I'm an immigrant. And so this idea of being strangers in a strange land and having to kind of, I think, not only sort of adapt, but also the dynamics that happen within the family, were things that I could really identify with. All the details resonated with me. And so I think it was so close to home. And so when we were making it, and what I was focused on initially was like, wow, this is really going to bless the Korean American community, particularly the immigrant community. But it wasn't until I think we premiered at Sundance that I started to realize, no, like the specificity of this story seems to remind people of family relationships, no matter what their background is. And this idea of being a stranger or out of place in a particular new place is something that everyone can identify with. And I think that specificity is what kind of made audiences lean in and maybe to evoke in them specific memories of their own experience as a family member, as someone who's struggling with new experiences, grappling with the complex relationships within a family. And so, yeah, seeing it with an audience that was predominantly not Korean American was a revelation to me.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, my wife, after we saw it, she pointed out that she felt like the story could also serve as a metaphor for our times.
Mhm.
That all of us, because of the pandemic, were put into a new experience that we weren't prepared for. We're
Right.
dealing with family and community that might be new and unexpected, and there's an unfamiliarity about it. And so she pointed out that it seems like a film that seems so current in that way, because I think, as you said, people can connect with it on the levels you mentioned, but I think, even deeper, just as what we've been going through as a country, as a world, it seems to really connect on that level as well.
Absolutely. I think when you are faced with a crisis, whatever it might be, and it might be like, oh my gosh, we're going to live in this trailer in the middle of nowhere and like uproot our lives,
Hmm.
or a pandemic, like I think it makes you start ask some really important questions about like what's important to me, what relationships are important to me, who am I in this new role or in this new situation that I find myself in. So there's I think that the experience of the Yi family in being uprooted in this like huge challenging new experience is something that I think resonates for all of us who've just gone through what we've gone through or are still in the middle of, actually. So
Right, exactly. Now, I heard that you were instrumental in getting the writer director Isaac
uh,
to change the ending
uh,
of the story. Is that true?
yeah, I think it was a I think this is what I think gave me a sense of how incredibly open and collaborative Isaac is as an artist. It's one the ending was originally more of an epilogue where we followed the Yu family up to the story of the fire, and then we would jump
Do we want
forward.
to give a spoilers warning?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a fire in the trailer, so
Oh, okay, great. Okay, great.
right.
So we're not spoiling anything, so
Yeah.
you don't have to fast forward if you haven't
Okay.
seen the
Yeah.
film yet.
But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, so we followed them up to the story of the fire, and then we jumped forward in time where the kids are older, and the adults are older. Everyone
Hmm.
is sort of looking back on this experience. And my main concern with that is that I understood that that gives you a moment of reflection on what you've seen and on the sum of what the family may have learned. But the concern was that we've had this kind of cinematic identification, particularly with the kids. Like, hopefully, we've fallen in love with them. And then to see them abstractly older, I think might distance us
Hmm.
from, where we are emotionally at that point. And we talked about it back and forth. And, one night, he said, yeah, I definitely, and we were still grappling with casting and all of that. And because we were actually in the middle of pre-production at that point.
Hmm.
And the next morning, he came back and he had the pages, which are the ending now, with this beautiful moment between father and son at the Minari patch that the grandmother has planted. And I was just like, oh my God, this is breathtaking. It's
Hmm.
beautiful, it's simple, it's reflective in the way that the ending was, but we're still with this family in this particular moment. And I was both really amazed that he would take this collaboration and sort of and be open to doing something about it, but also the incredible talent that it takes to come up with new pages that feel so perfect and organic, within the space of like 24 hours. And so I was just like, I was already excited to work with Isaac, and it just made me that much more excited. The
Hmm.
producer was not too happy with me at that point. She's just like,
Really?
I don't want to talk to him for a little while. So,
Oh,
it's like,
is it because they were headed in a particular direction and
they
then
had these
it had to like,
locations, and also like that ending was what one of the things that she fell in love with on the script and stuff like that.
oh,
But I
wow.
think after she saw it ultimately, she was just like, okay, well, this totally works and it's beautiful. So
Interesting. Okay. Okay. And what's interesting about Isaac too is, from what I understand, he was at a turning point himself where he was about to go to Korea to teach. And this film, I mean, it all kind of happened very quickly, didn't it?
it's pretty miraculous. I mean, anybody in your audience that knows how long it takes to raise money and then do pre-production on a feature film. I mean, this story is breathtaking. I think he finished the script in 2018, and he was actually in Korea teaching for University of Utah. He was an adjunct professor in a campus near Seoul, and it's such a moving story because he's like, I'll do one last screenplay almost as a kind of like capstone, a kind of marker of where I am creatively, and I want it to be a story of where I was in my life, where my family was in my life when I was my daughter's age, because he looked at his daughter, his beautiful daughter, and he's just like, what can I sort of tell her? What legacy can I leave to her from a filmmaking standpoint that she'll understand? And so he decided to write this screenplay. So he finished it, I think, fall of 2018. Nobody really wanted to read it. Nobody was interested in the project. And then he gave it to the woman who became his agent, Christina Chow, and she loved it, signed on to be his agent, showed it to Stephen Yun's team. Stephen loved it. He came on board. By the spring of 2019, we were in pre-production. Wow. Because Plan B came on board through, the brilliance of Christina Oh, who's one of the producers there. She brought together a team. Somehow, through Providence, she had met all of these department heads and people who were Korean American who had sort of got to a certain place where they could be considered for a Plan B movie, including me, thank God, because she and I had worked together on Last Black Man in San Francisco the year before. And so she brought together the team really quickly, brought together Julia Kim to do our casting. Miraculously, we were able to find these incredible actors, including Yeri Han, Yoon Yo-jung, who's like a legend in Korea. Our child actors like Noel and David and Alan, who, has everybody seen like how talented they are.
And a great name.
Yeah. It's Alan. Exactly. We love Alans. But we were shooting by that summer, locked in the fall and winter, and then premiered at Sundance the following January. So, I mean, so less than a year from when we started shooting, basically, is when it premiered, and it won the Audience Award and the Grand Jury Prize there, and it was just like breathtaking. It was like a miracle.
Incredible. Yes. I was at that Sundance standing in line to see the film, but we were like 10 people away from seeing it.
Oh, no!
So close. So close. But I saw the billboard on Hollywood Boulevard, and just knowing the story of, what Isaac went through, just seeing that billboard, I thought, wow. I mean, just back then, if you had shown that to anyone on your team and said, this is where you're going to be at this period of time, like no one would have believed it. But
I would have been like, that's a really good Photoshop job, basically. Right. Yeah, well done.
Right. Yes. But so inspiring. Now, and as you said, you were dealing with a tight production timeline. How many days did you have to shoot the film?
It was an insanely short amount of time. It was 25 days to shoot the feature. As an example, all of those scenes that are in the chicken sexing factory, there's like maybe 8 scenes. All of those were shot in one day.
Wow.
It was like close to, I think, like 15 pages. It's a crazy kind of schedule to do.
And then for the actors, whatever their emotional journey is, they've got all condensed into one day.
Exactly. Like everything was like all the scenes for that location, except for the the trailer home where they live. Like everything was like one day here, one day there, one day here. And so,
right.
Again, I think it just is a testament to, Providence acting, and that, the talent that Isaac has and our DP, Lachlan Milne, has, that they were able to get such beautiful material, such like perfect performances and things like that, within the space of just 25 days. It's incredible.
There's one moment I'd love to ask you about, that when you talked about this scene for the chickens where they're taking the males apart from the females, and then they would actually incinerate the male chickens, right?
Yeah.
And there's a scene where the
Although
main.
that's not shown in the movie.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah,
No, no, no.
yeah.
But you see the smokestack, and
Yeah.
that's what's kind of happening. But there's a scene where the main male character, he's completely defeated. The next shot is of the smokestack and the smoke going up. Was that purposeful? Did you purposely think, I'm going to juxtapose these two together to communicate like what's happening?
Oh my gosh, Alan, that's such. You're the first person to actually mention that, and like that's one of my favorite juxtapositions.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, we definitely were like, we have to call back to that, but we don't want to do it in an overt way. But
Uh,
yeah, I think because it's at that location too that Stephen Yun, who's the character who's defeated at that point, Jacob says to his son, males are discarded because they're not that useful, so we have to be useful, and it's really at that time that he's reached this place where however hard he's tried, circumstances have kind of defeated him, and so we
hmm.
wanted that to be kind of like a cinematic resonance with that moment of where he is. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Brilliant. So good. I mean, and even I might have been the first person to mention it too, but I think subconsciously, I mean, this is why I think the movie really connects with people because I'm sure subconsciously it's registering with people, even though consciously they don't,
Mhm.
might not be realizing it. And I think that's why so much of the nuance and beauty of the film really connects with people because whether they're consciously realizing or not, I think you've built in so many wonderful moments and interactions and so many unsaid, interactions that you're getting one story here and another story back here. And I think that's part of what's really moving people.
And I think that's what makes me love the process of editing so much,
Mm.
because you're the first audience to notice the combining and the recombining of not just images like that of like the defeated hero and then the incinerator, right, but also noticing the combining and recombining of scenes, of
Mm.
reordering of things, and as an editor you're the first person to react to that, to say like, oh wow, I'm so surprised by this because it has meaning beyond our original intention. And so the
Mm.
process itself feels like a process of constant discovery.
Mm.
And as an audience, as someone who loves movies, as an audience member, like that kind of freshness and that kind of excitement is what makes me love the craft. So.
Mm. That's great. So does it feel like when you're getting into the editing room that this is a process of remaking it in some level and finding those moments and creating them?
Without question. I think what you're doing ideally as an editor is serving as an advocate or an ombudsman for the audience,
Hmm.
because the director, he or she has a very clear idea of what they want to say. They have a very clear idea of what they want the audience to sort of feel about these characters or about this story or about this location, what have you. And I think your primary role is, as you craft the scenes, as you cut things out, as you move things around, as you determine the order of information or emotions that the audience should go through linearly as they experience a film, is to be that first reaction to it, is to say, you know what? I know we want the audience to love this person by this point, by minute 15 here, for that to solidify, but I'm not quite there yet. What can we do to sort of, through a look or gesture or a scene or a line of dialogue, to help cement that relationship, or, or to create a sense of mystery or what have you? Like, I think you're advocating for the audience to say, it's coming through or it's not coming through. And that's the dialogue that you're having with the director or with the showrunner or what have you.
Now, when during the actual shooting, those 25 days, where were you located? Were you here in LA editing?
Yeah, our cutting room was in Los Angeles,
Okay.
near Atwater Village, actually, in an old exterminator building, which was hilarious. Like there were like big pictures, like drawings of like different beetles and bugs that they had kept.
Oh
from
my
the decoration. So
God.
it was a little spooky, but and kind of weirdly beautiful too. But yeah, so we were there while they were shooting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Actually, they were shooting Tulsa for Arkansas, basically.
I see. Okay. And were there moments where you talked to Isaac and you said, listen, I think we really need this shot or that shot, like you were seeing holes? Like, what are those conversations like?
I think it's partly you're a good therapist, right? So
Mm,
you're showing them scenes to say, "Hey, look, it's working. I know you're exhausted at the end of like your 80-hour week, but like look at the beauty you're creating." And so like I'm sending him scenes at the end of every week and
mm,
giving him a sense of, how the family dynamics and how the performances are shaping up. But also like as you are pointing out, very practical things like we're about to wrap out on the trailer, what do we need? And
mm,
I would do things like beg for, please give me an exterior establishing shot so that I have a tool to create space in time. Because
mm,
like you can't you can't cut to black to create emotional space in time most of the time. And
mm,
so like give me that, or to if I need to move a scene around from day to night, or split up nights, I need a way to sort of establish that. So I would beg for stuff like that.
mm,
Probably the most consequential conversation we had was, again, referring to the fire. There because our budget was so limited, they were thinking about maybe not burning the barn down, so and using CG fire in order to do those shots. And so we went back and forth, and I was able to sort of, because I also have a visual effects background as a VFX editor, was
mm,
able to show them examples of like, well, this is what it would look like, and it
mm,
doesn't quite hang together if that's kind of a marquee moment. Like
mm.
if it's incidental, and this is such a cathartic moment for the family, like it has to be important. And I think conversations like that, both from a narrative, coming from a narrative perspective to answer a technical question, are some of the things that we can do as editors while they're shooting.
Yeah, it sounds like you really were an advocate for the director for helping his vision come to life. Because I can see from the producer side, they're thinking dollar signs,
Yeah.
but you're thinking story, authenticity. How can this connect with people in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I mean everything is a negotiation, right? And
Mm,
so I think, it's not like the producers are not advocating for story. It's that then they're like, well, then we can allocate it for this other thing. I
mm,
think so it then becomes sort of like, how critical is it? How important is it? And that becomes a kind of uh, a matter of artistic opinion
mm,
and taste, I guess, right? And so that was the kind of negotiation that was happening. Thankfully, everybody that was involved with the project did it out of love and like for the story, because like certainly I mean on a project of this modest budget, like we weren't all of us weren't being paid our rates or anything like that. It was
mm,
very much because we believed in the story that Isaac was telling, and for a lot of us it was so personally meaningful to us. So
mm. Now, were there scenes as you were editing that were painful to edit out of the story?
oh my gosh, yeah. It's almost like you have this like prophetic way of asking like great questions. Yes, absolutely. One of the basically the last scene that we cut out of the movie was this hilarious scene, probably the funniest scene in the movie,
Hmm.
where it's at the beginning of when David goes on the sleepover with his friend. So yeah, this friend who initially said, why is your face so flat?" And
Right.
then they become best friends, right? So it was the beginning of that sleepover, and it's this hilarious scene where his friend is showing him, Johnny is showing David how to ride a bike. But at the end of the bike ride, he's also saying, "Go over there, ride the bike," and he's also showing him how to flip the bird for the first time.
Gosh.
And it's so funny. He's like, go over there. Now flip me off. Now flip me off. And of course, David doesn't know what he's doing. He gets it wrong. He does it like this. In this like curly way. It's like it's so funny. Alan is so cute. It's hilarious. Emil wrote this incredible like score for it, and it's
Uh,
just a delight. But it was one of those things where now at that point we had crafted the film to know exactly where we should be emotionally at that point. And there's times where you can provide counterpoint emotionally and it stays just as effective. But that scene in particular took us a little bit out of where we should be and focused on in terms of where the family's
Mm.
fortunes were at that point.
Mm.
Because this is soon after Sunja, the grandma, had had a stroke and things like that. And so we wanted to be very careful about calibrating, the story of the family at that point. And unfortunately, that was definitely one of the darlings that we needed to kill in order.
Mm. Interesting.
But it will definitely, hopefully, be on the deleted scenes. Are there DVDs anymore? I don't know, the Blu-ray, whatever. Like,
Right. Yeah. No, you can't. Even if you get a movie online, they have
right.
extras that you can get with it.
Okay, yeah. So hopefully it'll be in the extras. Yeah.
Yeah. And in talking about that scene in the church where the boy asks Alan's character why you have a flat face, I think that really reminded me of another reason I think the movie is connecting to people, because in that same scene you see the son deal with that comment, and then there's a little girl who talks to his sister and says, I'm going to say a bunch of words. Tell me when I say something in
Yeah.
your language.
Yeah.
And then she says a bunch of gibberish, but then
Yeah.
she connects one of the words as actually a Korean word.
Yeah.
She says, oh, that's a word.
Yeah.
But just the fact that I just think about the fact that those boys became friends, and that boy, I mean, there's so much, it's just reflective, I think, of the grace and redemption that just flows through the movie, because we're currently in such a toxic culture where if someone said that to someone, they would immediately be like, whoa, and it would be like a really big thing. But instead, they become friends and they grow and they become closer so they can understand and care for each other better. So there's just so much of that in the film that I think people are really connecting with.
And I think that's reflective of Isaac's faith, and also reflective of how Isaac wanted to portray the people with dignity in this film, to show that people are not one thing. They're not one thing that they say. And I don't think that comes from a kind of Pollyanna style naivete as far as like racism doesn't exist or classism doesn't exist in this world. Of course, I mean, I think if you're a believer, you understand and you anticipate that brokenness is going to exist in the world. But it's how do you look ultimately at the person behind the behavior? And is it possible to see their complexity and to see them as full human beings outside of anything that they say or they do? And I think that that's definitely how Isaac views the world. And I think the way he wanted to portray his characters. I think the most poignant example is Paul, who, when you first meet him, he looks so off-putting, like with his big Coke bottle glasses and his dirty shirt, and and for a lot of people, like the fact that he's praying in tongues in this weird way the first time you meet him, it can be a kind of caricature of, I think, of a evangelical believer in this way. But I think what you come to do is you come to see the fullness of who he is, how complex he is. And there's real dignity that I think is afforded to his faith as well. So I think in the same way that the film encourages us to look again at our parents, to look again at our children, to look again at our grandmas, and to see their fullness and their complexity, I think it does that to every character, ideally. And that was one of the priorities that we had in determining how do we craft a particular performance, and what scenes do we include, or what moments do we include or exclude from particular characters.
That's great. Well, was there a time in your life where you thought or realized that you had a talent with editing, like a moment you thought, oh, this is something that I could do for a living?
It's funny because I think there was a real pivotal moment in my late 20s. I had had kind of an ambivalent relationship to fully committing to a career in film, because my parents are first generation immigrants and I saw how hard they sacrificed for my education. And
did they have certain expectations? They wanted you to be this, or this?
Unspoken, I
Ah,
think largely in the community, because everybody talks about like, oh, you know, this person's son got into Stanford, or this person's son got into Berkeley, or that type of thing,
mm,
or that person's daughter is going to be a doctor. Like there is this kind of reverential way in which these certain milestones are celebrated,
mm,
and so it gives you a very clear sense of what's valued. And I think I was like, how do I take such a risky move career wise when they've, sacrificed so much for my future?
mm,
But yeah, I think around that time when I was making the decision, I was taking a night class at a nonprofit arts organization, and I was doing a video about a little documentary about a 75-year-old Chinese man who moved pianos for a living.
mm,
And he claimed to have moved 7,000 pianos in his lifetime. And the process of like re-engaging with this subject and putting together this video, and like determining when music should start, and when when to cut here and when to cut there, it just made me like fall in love with the process. And
mm,
I think the end result I was really pleased with. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is something that I can do. This is something that I can really dive into, and hopefully will be endlessly fascinating for me as a craft.
mm,
And so that was one of the ways that I determined that, okay, if I am going to take this risk, which I decided to do when I turned 31, um, I'm going to do it through editing because I love the craft. And very practically, I was like, I could probably get a paying job doing this faster than I could as a writer, director, or a producer. And
mm,
that was a little bit of the kind of like practical approach to making an impractical decision
mm,
that I made. And credit to my parents, they ultimately blessed me and supported me and said that more than anything, when we came to the States, we wanted you to have the freedom to choose.
mm.
More than financial stability, we feel like that's important, because we didn't have choices as much when we were growing up in Korea. And so, especially my father, that was a priority for him. And because I made the choice a little bit later in life, they could already see that I had made good, solid, practical decisions. I, had supported myself, and, was financially, smart enough to not be starving. So I think that those two things kind of helped them to bless my career choice ultimately.
Mm. That's great. And I imagine now they just must be especially happy and proud of you.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, my mom is over the moon because like she's hearing from like her college alumni network. She's like, "Oh, Mrs. Parks called and said that she watched the film, and Mrs. Lee said she saw an interview with you in this paper." And like, so she's just the belle of the ball. Like, she's having so much fun. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. Yes, a decision that has paid off nicely. I mean, as an editor, you are looking at scenes, you're looking at the footage, you're looking at scenes over and over. How do you keep yourself from numbing out to figuring out if something is effective or not? How do you keep yourself fresh as you look at things over and over?
I think there's nothing better than time.
Mm,
I think sometimes if you're hitting a wall on a particular scene, it's good to put it away and then come back to it so that you can approach it with fresh eyes. Even if you're in the middle of something, to just stop and go take a walk, or just stop and have lunch or something like that. To walk away and then to come back, because I feel like that's the best way to get your subconscious to come up with good ideas, but also to see something new. And the other thing that I do habitually is have other people in the room. So when I finish a cut of even the first cut of a scene, which is always, grossly imperfect,
mm,
I always invite my assistant or a PA or somebody into the room, and to just be naked and just be like, "Hey, what do you think?" And then as soon as I start playing, I see things differently.
mm,
There's something about being next to an audience member that
mm,
transforms your relationship to your work, and you get much more objectivity to it. And so I think I learned that kind of like, you have to be fearless early in that process from many of the editors that I worked alongside and were mentored by. Particularly folks like Billy Goldenberg, who is a five-time Oscar nominee and
mm,
and winner for Argo. So learning lessons like that of like, don't be afraid to show imperfection early on, because it you have to be secure in the process and knowing that ultimately it's going to get to a better place.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this interview is sponsored by Navigating Hollywood, which encourages and equips entertainment professionals to live relationally and spiritually holistic lives. Navigating Hollywood offers marriage courses, pre-marriage courses, and the Alpha course, where people in entertainment can talk through some of life's biggest questions. If you're interested in signing up or learning more about these courses, go to navigatinghollywood.org. Harry, you had mentioned earlier about faith and that being something that informed the film. How do you work at living a relationally and spiritually holistic life?
Well, I think there are two ways, because I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of what is the intersection of faith and work for me. And one of the real benefits, I would say, is I think being in the film industry, you're in an industry where it's hard to know where you stand a lot of the time, especially in the middle of as you're developing your career. There aren't the traditional milestones to say like, oh, I'm making progress, or, oh, I'm like secure at this level. So for example, like, the year that I got the biggest break of my career, which was co-editing Detroit with Billy Goldenberg and for Catherine Bigelow, I started that year editing a web series, which is a much more humble, level to be at. I had edited a lot of other stuff, but like that's where I happened to find myself at the beginning of that year. And it was a quality web series, and then that went well. But then later on, I was recommended to then cut a pilot for the CW, and that was like a big step up in terms of perceived stature and responsibility and pay and all of those things, and that went really well. But then later that year, I ended up working, in a room surrounded by Oscar winners, at the pinnacle of, I think, where a lot of editors want to be, and getting that kind of opportunity. And that taught me something really important, which was like, I'm still the same person. Like nothing has changed, from the person who was editing the web series to the person. And so it just feels so arbitrary. And so if I like invest so much of my identity in what I happen to be doing, or for a lot of us, what I happen to not be doing, or I happen to not be, then it's that kind of emotional whiplash can really be debilitating. And I think that that's something that I definitely experienced coming up. Having started later in life, I saw a lot of the people that I went to college with. They were buying homes or getting married or like achieving some level of success in their careers, and here I was doing coffee runs, and getting lunches for people. And I was just like, man, it's so hard to negotiate that. And I really feel like having a firm identity outside of title, outside of project, outside of, whatever I happen to be doing right now, and an identity that is very much has inherent value, which I feel like, in my faith tradition, which is Christianity, I'm told that I have incredible worth just because of who I am, no matter what I do, or no matter, what I accomplish or don't accomplish, that I'm incredibly worthy. And I think that can be a very stabilizing viewpoint to navigate the kind of ups and downs, the inevitable ups and downs of this career. And I think that that's something that, even now I really pay attention to, because one of my longest mentors, is a different editor who's also an Oscar winner. He told me like years back, yeah, I'm just waiting for the interview that I go into and I talk to the director and I mention the film that, that I won the Oscar for, right? And then he's like, oh yeah, that film, my dad loves that movie. And I was just like, oh, so relevance, oh, longevity, like you're at the pinnacle of your career and you're still anxious. You have to be anxious about, will I stay relevant? Can I stay, And so like that insecurity never ends. And
Hmm.
I realized like that's just a staple of what we have to grapple with. And that becomes a skill set you have to develop. And I say that to a lot of young people that are coming in. It's like your ability to deal with uncertainty is one of the disciplines you have to develop. And whatever you can do to stabilize yourself, to be able to withstand that, I think is going to be a credit to your longevity in this industry. And
Hmm.
so that's definitely probably the most important and fruitful way is establishing an identity outside of whatever I'm doing at the time.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've heard the one of the most miserable days in Hollywood is the day after the Oscars because either people who thought this is going to give me significance getting this award
Yeah,
have not gotten the award, so they don't have that sense of significance. Or the people who did get the reward were looking to the award for significance and suddenly realize, oh shoot, I still don't feel that sense of significance that I thought I would feel from that. So it does seem like very powerful to find your sense of grounding and your significance outside of what others say of you. I mean,
absolutely,
I think,
absolutely. And I think that has resonance, even not just title to title, but I think challenge to challenge. Like I feel very much like going into an interview, which can be very nerve wracking, especially if you want a particular job, is to know that you'll be okay no matter what happens, that your life isn't going to end or radically change necessarily as a result of the results of whatever happens if you get this gig or not. Is to be centered in that way, I think makes you ultimately more relaxed, ultimately more versatile, nimble, in an experience like that, because not everything's kind of hanging on that one thing that you have to do. And ultimately it's very practically a great way to be centered.
did your spiritual journey impact your experience with Minari?
Absolutely. Because Isaac's a believer, and I think it was the first time where I could talk about the the kind of gratitude that I was feeling, the kind of um, desire to honor this material that I was feeling in very explicit terms. And so, like, it was the first time that before a screening with an audience, we could just pray, and just sort of go into it with
That's
that.
very common, by the
Yeah.
way.
Okay. Right. Right.
So
Right.
that's, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, oh, if it's common, like, then I must be messy. I'm in the wrong cutting rooms because.
That's right. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
No, no. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm joking, but that
Yeah.
is incredible to hear that
Yeah.
you prayed before a screening. I mean, so that's what happened before you showed at Sundance. You and
Yeah,
Isaac said,
before Sundance, but also before friends and family screenings. When we were
hmm,
looking for feedback, like
hmm,
we were praying for like just peace and discernment and things like that. And I think what it is like, of course, everybody's asking for a kind of divine intervention, but more than anything, it's letting go of the burden of complete responsibility. And I
hmm,
think that that's so liberating, is to say, like, this is, whatever happens, whatever we do isn't completely up to me. I'm not alone in this. I actually have an alarm that I set that goes off at 3 p.m. every day, called the Holy Spirit alarm, which is which, like, I hear the alarm, whatever I'm doing, and I stop and I say, thank you so much for partnering with me on these creative decisions. Thank you so much for, like, making me think about not just the work that I'm doing, but how relational I need to be with the people that I'm doing it. And, help me, remind me of that it's not just this deadline, but also how people are doing emotionally in the cutting room that should be my priority. So it just sort of resets me and says that it's not about me. It's not, the stakes aren't about this, and that I'm not alone in doing this. That it's about community, and that it's about that kind of partnership.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if you're watching and this doesn't make sense to you, I definitely suggest checking out the Alpha course, which I mentioned earlier, because that's a place you get to talk about all these big questions, spiritual questions with other people in entertainment. Well, your next project
Mhm.
is the Marvel movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Tell us the ending.
Okay. Um, Kidding, I'd be so hunted down. Yeah.
No, right.
Yeah.
Like this video would like get so, it'd become very viral, but then
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
kind of
Yeah, yeah,
collapse
yeah,
underneath that. Well, now I know you can't tell me anything about the story, but
yeah.
for those of you who are not familiar at all with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, this is what I found at Marvel.com,
Mhm.
so we can talk about this.
Sure.
And it basically says Shang-Chi is a master of numerous unarmed and weaponry-based styles,
Uh-huh.
which when I read that, I thought, are there any other possibilities? Like,
Right.
so basically, he's good at fighting.
Ace,
And
ace
the
styles.
story,
Yeah.
the story is about him confronting the past he thought he left behind following an encounter with the Ten Rings organization, the same terror group who was behind Tony Stark's kidnapping in Iron Man.
Yeah, so
Ah.
it's part of the MCU. It's part of the Marvel.
Yes, amazing. I mean, I'm a big fan of the MCU movies. I just feel like they announce a title, and I'm just like, I feel like I should just send them money because I'm going to go to it and I'm going to enjoy it. I mean,
That's great. That's great.
there's
And you're not
really nothing.
alone.
I mean,
Yeah.
sure, some of them maybe I haven't enjoyed as much as others, but I'm a huge fan of MCU's work. Now, I assume you must be a fan on some level,
I
doing.
am. I've watched every single one of the movies, and
Nice.
I went through, before I started, I rewatched a lot of them, and so yeah, just to kind of remind myself of what's been, so that when references come up and things like that, and story decisions happen, that I'm not a total noob. So definitely.
And was that like a pinching moment? Like when you found out you got this job, like, I mean, just looking at what's been happening in your career, where you get,
Yeah.
this very personal kind of story that's, very indie, and then this kind of film that is going to be seen by a gazillion people. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. I mean, I just feel, again, I feel so incredibly blessed, and I feel like, again, like I feel inoculated to not take this the wrong way, in a way, right? To
mm,
say that it makes me different in any way. I'm still the same person,
mm,
and I'm just in incredibly fortunate circumstances.
mm,
So every day I feel grateful, and my hard work when I go in is to try to honor that, try to
mm,
honor the opportunity. But for me, I think what really excited me was to get the chance to work with, obviously, the sort of the producers at Marvel, who have really, I think, created a universe where I think there's a consistently strong story and characters, and to be working with those folks, but also with our amazing director Destin Daniel Cretton, who did Short Term 12 and Just Mercy, which are these beautiful,
mm.
very humanistically centered films. And my co-editor is Elizabeth Ronald's daughter, and Nat Sanders, who are just at the top of their craft. And so, along with everybody else on the crew, I mean, just getting a chance to work with people like that, and within a place where like you have the resources to tell incredible stories, like that was like a dream come true. And the cherry on top was just, I'm very committed to diverse storytelling, and to be a part of the first Asian American superhero is just, that's really a dream.
Oh, amazing. I mean, because I think of when Black Panther came out and how
Yeah,
monumental that was,
yeah,
and how this similarly could have that kind of impact. I mean, I remember when, not too long ago, when Crazy Rich Asians came out and the
yeah.
studios are like, Asians go see movies? Like it
Right,
was
I
like
know.
such
Like
a big
what?
shock. They're like, what's going on? And it
Yeah,
was, I just couldn't believe it.
yeah,
I was like, what? Like, I mean, So I mean, what what were your thoughts during that process? Because that was like one of those moments where they thought, oh, maybe we should have more Asian leads in movies. You know, maybe the audience will go see them. I mean, was that a moment where you thought, you know, I mean, kind of like a duh, like, I mean, you have been neglecting this for such a long time. Like, I'm just curious what kind of went through your mind.
Well, I think, one of the things that I found so brilliant and gratifying was that there were organizations that were saying, like Gold Open, for example, that were like, we have to vote with our dollars.
Mm.
Hollywood's going to listen to us when we actually show up on opening weekend, when we sort of say, like, yeah, it's not only, the right thing to do socially or culturally, but it's also the right thing to do financially. And I think that that's a lesson that I think we have to keep reminding producers and studios of, is that we will show up, that we will stream, we will, go to the premieres and things like that. And what I loved was that there are organizations and people that are willing to organize people along those lines.
Mm.
And I think there's, a critical mass now of diversity in terms of, like, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well. So people in craft positions, people in executive positions and things like that, where it's like, oh, okay, like there's new material, there's exciting material, there's a perspective that's coming into play that is not only sort of artistically interesting, but, financially potentially interesting too. And I also think that it's important to not discount the impact of China as a market too,
Mm.
where Asian themes and things like that, things that sort of are sympathetic or amenable to Asian culture, is something that has like a real dollars and cents impact on the industry as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I have to say that that, plus the fact that a lot of organizations like the Academy, every craft guild and things like that, they are making it an actual priority to increase diversity in their ranks, and they're not sort of doing lip service, they're actually, making big efforts for it. So I think it's a very, very exciting time, and ultimately one that's going to benefit everybody with new stories and, new perspectives.
Completely. I remember the premiere of Black Panther.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw any of the footage or pictures from that, but the cast looked amazing and
Yeah.
they dressed at a premiere that you typically don't see. And
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and thinking, I was like, well, yeah, it is the first movie that has a black superhero.
Yeah.
So, and mainly black cast. So, of course, a different expression is going to come
Yeah.
out. And it really made me think, what are the other expressions that we have not seen yet?
Yeah.
And I think this upcoming film could potentially be one of them, but I can't wait to see the ripple effect of that and just what we can experience as an audience and even as a culture, as a world, because we're seeing something from a perspective that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the premiere. So yeah, definitely.
Now, what was it like going from an indie film to
Yeah.
a major studio film?
I mean, it's funny because, like, I think the heart of the process is still very much the same,
Hmm.
but the resources of this level of storytelling is breathtaking. I
Mm.
think, in the same way that, like, Pixar has a process where they anticipate changes. They anticipate having to, do the hard work of making room for changes, even like big changes, late breaking, in order to get it right, is very similar to the way I'm seeing in Marvel they make movies, that they anticipate that it won't be perfect the first time. And there's a real wisdom, I think, in that. And they're willing to commit the dollars and the resources to make sure that that happens, which is why I think the audience has noticed there's this kind of consistent quality that comes out from that studio. And so I think that's been really interesting. Because, like, like in notes meetings and stuff, like in reviews, like, we'll talk about something and then it'll actually get done instead of like, oh, we can't do that. And I was just like, whoa, they're actually doing that? They're actually changing that animation, or they're
Wow.
actually we're actually going to try this out, or we're going to reshoot this. Like that kind of like openness to sort of like understanding the process is really breathtaking to be a part of.
Hmm.
But I think because I came up as an assistant editor and a visual effects editor on bigger films, like for example, I was the VFX editor on The Revenant, and
And for people who don't know what a VFX editor is,
oh yeah, it's somebody who is the interface between all of the visual effects entities, like visual effects houses and coordinators and producers and stuff, and what happens in the cutting room, because the cut is always changing and shots are being replaced and scenes are being changed and stuff. So it's much more of an organizational technical position that says to all of the vendors, oh, by the way, that shot that you've been working on, that's no longer in the movie. Or, oh, by the way, like here's 3 other shots that are there in their place. And so it's this constant that communication has to happen quickly, efficiently, and that's what a visual effects editor is largely a part of.
hmm. Yeah, amazing that. I mean, I'm sure just to imagine how much that experience prepared you for taking on this role.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I feel so grateful, as long as a journey as it's been, that I feel so grateful that everything that I've learned, both good and bad, is something that has kind of equipped me to feel comfortable, in this expanded capacity. Like I'm very familiar with uh, films on this scale because I came up in those cutting rooms, and so I think there's real value, as hard as it was to be an assistant editor, as hard as it was to sort of be waiting for that shot. I feel like every one of those jobs kind of seasoned me for an experience like this.
And the other thing I'm sure it's very different on this film is that the fact that it has 3 editors. Is
Mhm.
that because of the size? Like, why 3 editors?
So very practically, it's actually 2 editors where we had a little bit of overlap, where I replaced one of the editors because she needed to move on to her next film.
Ah,
This 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 because of COVID, and they were shooting in Australia. The schedule got extended by I think over 6 months. So
hmm.
they were there basically 100% longer than they were supposed to be there. And
Wow.
so everything got pushed. And so like unfortunately it started to overlap with their next her next project. And so I came on to sort of take her place. And there were huge shoes to fill because Elizabeth is a legendary editor. So but yeah, I think in terms of working with any kind of a team, I think you have to sort of uh, begin with respect, with mutual respect and good communication. And I think we decided pretty early on how we wanted to divide the film, and it's not always this way. Like it's not the way we did it was like you'll work on these sections and I'll work on these sections, right?
Hmm.
Whereas actually I came in, I was the junior editor, so I was like, what sections would you like me to work on? So and then we've been kind of staying with those sections through the process. But I think I've been on other projects, like for example, I was an additional editor on First Man, where we in various times touched every scene in the film practically,
Hmm.
in different capacities. And so it really depends on the project, but it fundamentally requires respect and great communication,
Hmm.
just like any kind of pivotal relationship, like a marriage or like being in a family or something like that. So
Right. Yeah. And obviously I'm sure this film has a lot of visual effects.
oh
And
yeah.
does that mean the footage that you work with typically looks incomplete, green screens? Like, is that kind of what the process looks like?
Absolutely. I mean it's pretty complicated because it begins with what's called previs or pre-visualization, where they're almost like animated storyboards, and that helps the filmmakers determine what to shoot and which angles to get. And because when you're dealing with something with a lot of visual effects, there's a lot of layers involved, right? So there's the background layer, which could be an entire CG landscape, for example, and certainly is true in Marvel films where that's often the case, right? There's the hero layer, which is the actual performance by your actor or actress, and then they could be interacting with CG characters, or they could be interacting, and so that's its own sort of requirement. And then there's all sorts of additional things that need to be composited in there, and so you may have one or another of those layers in the cut at different times. And you have to sort of be able to comment on that, and also see how does, as the shot changes in terms of its depth, in terms of its complexity, in terms of its detail, how does that change the decisions that you've been making in terms of its width? Like, how long is it? Does it need to breathe more? Does it need to, can it be more compact for the sake of pace or action, that type of thing? So unlike, a small intimate family drama in which you don't have to worry about the evolution of a particular shot, in this kind of film, you definitely do. You have to sort of deal both with width and depth in terms of.
And have you ever found that later when the VFX are come in, that then you realize, oh, we need to actually edit this differently because it's just not working once all of that is in place?
Absolutely. It's this constant evolving process. And so I think, I think you learn early on as you're coming up as an editor is to not be precious about anything, that it's fluid constantly. And I think the editors that I've most been influenced by are the people that that never rest until it can be that much better. They're constantly improving. They're constantly open to taking apart even this really delicate construction that they've made, because it's only through that sort of breaking apart, remaking, breaking apart, remaking, that something really great emerges. So.
I'm curious how you keep yourself just inspired as an artist. Are there regular habits that you have, or what do you do to just keep yourself going?
Well, I think what really helps is not just to focus on the work, but to focus on the people too. And that's been a real eye-opening thing. My wife, she's an attorney, and she's had her own law firm for close to 20 years. It's an immigration firm. And the way she approaches her work isn't just case by case, it's also person by person. So not only the clients that come through her doors, but every one of her employees, the associates, the receptionist, everybody, that she realizes that she's there in that workplace, not just to do the work, but to have strong and flourishing relationships with everybody. And I think seeing how and that could have consequences that are not necessarily good for business. Like, for example, there's one attorney, a junior attorney she hired, that literally like 3 weeks after she started work, she had this really traumatic breakup with her boyfriend. And so she was very unproductive for like the first 1 month, and she's a brand new hire. And I think the right business.
Becky?
Yeah. I didn't want to, sorry, Becky. No, but I think the right business decision might have been to be like, hey, I'm sorry, this isn't working out, but instead, they really cared for her and nurtured that relationship and ministered to her through that process. But what that created was that cemented this really strong and loyal relationship between employee and employer, where she's so invested in the success of this firm, not just because of the work that they do, but because this is a community, this is a group. And I think she really, in running her business like that, and I realized this is something I need to bring to the cutting room, to say I need, as busy as I am, I need to stop and have this conversation with our PA to find out how he or she is doing. I need to ask, my assistant editor, what do you want to do next? What's important for you? How do I invest in your success? That type of thing. And that kind of investment, I think, in people keeps things new and keeps things, because people are endlessly fascinating and endlessly problematic, right? It keeps things interesting and not just sort of fixated on the work itself.
That's great. And what about as an editor, are there regular things that you do to keep yourself sharp and keep your eye kind of sharp as an
Mhm.
editor?
I think probably the greatest thing is constantly inviting audiences in. I
Mm,
think that's what really, really helps is no matter where I am in the process to invite people into the cutting room, invite, whoever happens to be passing by to look at something, because that changes the way that I look at something. And that's one technique. Another technique is maybe just take walking away and like, putting something away and working on something else. Because I know that if you just watch something over and over and over again and like hit your head against the wall, it's not going to get any better because you're not going to have fresh insights into it. In
mm,
other words, like you're constantly trying to re-invoke the audience inside of you and not just the craftsperson.
mm,
That kind of dual mindset is so important for an editor to have. So whatever you can do to sort of get out of the mode of being the craftsperson, of like forcing a cut to work in a particular way, and just sitting back and saying, okay, no, I'm going to watch it now. That's when you get your best insights, basically.
mm. That's great.
Mhm.
And I imagine that it must be a lot of work working as an editor,
Yeah.
a lot of hours. How do you balance between your work and your family life?
I think early on it was very hard because I think if you want to edit, you often start off as an assistant. I started off as a PA, then an apprentice, then a second assistant, then a first assistant, and etc. But even during that whole process, you're usually working anywhere from 50 to 60-hour weeks. Sometimes on busy times, even longer than that. You also have to make time to actually edit because these junior positions, you're often not editing, you're organizing, you're getting lunch orders, you're doing everything but editing. But you have to remember what you ultimately want to do in terms of your craft. And so I think early on it was so hard because like, I would finish a work day, and on the first one of the first features I recut, I'd finish my work day at like 8 or 9 o'clock, and then the director would come in, and then I would work with them until like 1 o'clock. And so like that. Unfortunately, that's just a little bit of what you have to do, and even in your rest times, your breaks. Like if you're on a TV show as an assistant, like you have to then during the rest period then spend that time cutting an indie feature or cutting a pilot or cutting something else. And so there isn't much of a balance early on, but I think what I've found is that if you're not afraid to share why you're prioritizing a particular activity, like with producers or with key creatives and stuff, and if your relationship is strong with that person, that often that it's important to make the courageous decision to ask sometimes, can I have this Wednesday night off because we host this thing, or can I have you know this weekend off, or are you okay with my having this weekend off because it's my kid's birthday or something like that. Like it's I think you have to have the courage to ask, but I think the way you develop that courage to ask is by developing credibility as somebody who is trustworthy and is a good collaborator and who cares as much about the project as they do, but also but also because you've invested in that relationship.
Mm.
So
Well, for someone who is interested in having a career as an editor,
yeah,
what advice would you have for them?
I would say edit. So find a way to try it out. It's really important because like the process is so because movies and TV shows feel so seamless as we're reading them or as we're watching them, right? That it feels like it would be easy to create, right? So I think like you have to try it to understand how difficult it is, how even a frame makes a difference, how angles make differences. So I think you have to practice. The second thing is watch classic movies. I think it's very important to break yourself out of whatever is the milieu of the day because it's the result of those conversations that we've been having about cinema is where we are right now. So we're looking at sort of the evolution and not necessarily the building blocks. And I think by going into that history, that incredibly rich history, not only do we sort of like start to see how certain techniques were developed, but also to see how masters told stories, what characters that masters were investing in, and things like that. And so I think I see gaps a lot in cinema literacy with young filmmakers sometimes, and they're just sort of like caught up in whatever is streaming now and wanting to imitate that. But I think it's really, really important to have that kind of literacy, because I can guarantee you that the people you want to work with have that literacy. And when you have conversations with them in an interview, when they're seeking collaborators, they want people that can speak that language, that has that depth of understanding of where we've come from. And because I think ultimately great editors are great filmmakers. And I think you have to adopt that mindset to be a true collaborator.
I love it. Harry, thank you so much for this interview, for taking this time to talk through Minari and your future, your next film. Congrats again on your Oscar nominations. I can't wait to see what happens. Please again, check out navigatinghollywood.org to find out more about what Navigating Hollywood has to offer. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.